Hello to you, my YouTube tribe. Welcome to my channel, Auntie Essie's Chat Cafe. This is Auntie Essie with another edition of our Friday Freak Out or the Rant video session. This week, I want to talk about Black History Month. So I'm going to say Happy Black History Month to each and every one. And actually, even though I said Happy Black History Month, I am not in favor of Black history. That's right. You heard that right. I am not in favor of Black History Month. Why is it that Black history, or there should even be such a thing as Black history? Why is it that only the Eurocentric history matters, or have been, why do we need to have Black History Month? Especially the month assigned to it. It's the shortest and the coldest month of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, most especially. Well, I think we need to do away with Black History Month. The reason why we need to do that is Black history is not just something that happens or something to be remembered for 28 or 29 days of the year. Black history, I know, is woven, has affected, it permeates our whole universe, our whole world. The Black people have been influential in history, been an influential part of history since time immemorial. Since time began, Black people have been here, and Black people have done significant things. I'm even thinking of my own family, some of my own family members. But I'm not even just talking about the 20th century. So today, this is my argument for either abolishing or eliminating or getting rid of Black History Month, whatever terminology you want to use. But I think it's essential to teach contribution of Black people to world history or to the world development, to each and every one. Considering what's happened this week, today, 2 days ago, the first day of Black History Month, the President of the United States had no idea who Frederick Douglass was or is. Well, at least according to him, Frederick Douglass is still alive. And I would love to meet Mr. Douglass and have a conversation with him myself. I think I probably could actually access Mr. Douglass and have a conversation with him before the President of the United States. But anyway, we won't go into that. But that is what had me thinking. It's essential. If contribution of Black people were taught to study in school, starting from whenever you start school. For example, when we talk about world history, when we talk about especially in my own family, when you're talking about the history of the Second World War, World War II, however you call it, there is no recognition of the immense sacrifice and the contribution of Black people. I'm talking about Black people from Africa, from the West Indies, from America, from all over the world. I am just one little person, but the reason why I printed this out, when I started thinking about this, when I printed this out, I have 12 pages here, 12 pages of people that I know off the top of my head and their involvements or their contribution to the welfare of others, the well-being of the world. So I am going to start with my own family. For this Black History Month, I am honoring the contribution that my uncle, Major Seth Kobla Anthony, who was a soldier and a diplomat. He was born in 1915 and died in 2008. He was born on June 15th, 1915. Just to tell you, he was the first black African soldier to be commissioned as an officer of the British Army. He was the first person of color, black person, to attend Sandhurst Academy. That's the same military academy that Prince Charles, Prince Harry, and Prince William went to. He served in the British Army's 81st Division of the Royal West African Frontier Force. That's what they call them. And he was the first black African to win His Majesty's Commission and the first non-white, as I mentioned before, to enter officer training at Sandhurst Academy. He was conscripted into the military academy in 1941. Yet, despite of all the barriers due to his color, he rose quite quickly through the ranks. He's actually quite a legend in Ghana. There are streets named after him. There are military barracks named after him. Yet, with all his contributions to Second World War, Britain hardly acknowledged him. He's barely a footnote in Britain when Britain or UK talks about their Second World War history. So that's just one person. There were people like Muhammad Ali, who not only was he one of the greatest athletes, but he was also one of the biggest humanitarians. There were people like Stokely Carmichael. Okay, these are, Muhammad Ali, Stokely Carmichael was an activist, and don't forget Stephen Biko of South Africa, who was against apartheid in South Africa, which got him killed. George Washington Carver, who was apparently dubbed by Time magazine as the Black Leonardo, like he was compared to Leonardo da Vinci. But, nobody really knows a lot about him. There's many people. Wow, just to name people who are still here. Oprah Winfrey. Not only that, not just because she's a TV personality, but she's a philanthropist. The things that Oprah has done, the many people that she's helped, she doesn't look at people's color. She helps the human being. The school that she established in South Africa to help girls' education. There was, of course, Frederick Douglass, who, according to Donald Trump, is still alive. But anyway, Frederick Douglass was an abolitionist, a writer, and a statesman. And he campaigned for the rights of women at a time when no woman actually had the right to vote. Of course, there's Kofi Annan, the former head of the UN, who's also from Ghana, and he's still alive. Wow, let's see who else. Yes, so, and then there were a sociologist and an activist, Du Bois Webb, or Webb Du Bois, and he was the first African American to gain his PhD from Harvard. Then there was Dr. Charles Drew, and he was a physician that revolutionized the science and the science of blood transfusions. And also he developed the technology that led to how we stop blood and do blood transfusions today. But you wouldn't know anything about that, or how many people know about that. There's so many people. you know, their Toussaint Overture. Toussaint was, you know, he was a slave, but a rebel slave leader in Haiti. You don't know Patrice Lumumba, who was an anti-colonist and activist who helped the Congo gain its independence from Belgium. Of course, there was people like, you know, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He was educated in America. He was very influential in, you know, insisting and working with the British for Ghana to gain its independence in 1957. Ghana will be celebrating its 60th independence this year. And that was Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Of course, there is, you know, people like George Pardmore, who was considered by some a communist. Yes, he was, but he was a strong Pan-Africanist, and the Pan-African movement was uniting people of Africa, uniting the continent of Africa, to the point that some of them even had the vision of Africa being ruled under one, being governed by under one government, all of the continent of Africa. Of course, Marcus Garvey, who was a civil rights activist back in the day, and who, you know, these were all people. Then let's see. Oh, I'm just looking. Of course, Mother Africa, Miriam Makeba, who was not only a musician but an activist, who was fighting against apartheid, got her exiled from South Africa. She also died in 2008. And of course, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela may have been fighting apartheid, but Nelson Mandela's philosophy was that no matter what he did, he focused on the being benefit to each and every person regardless of color. I mean, his achievements went on and on. He went from being imprisoned for decades to becoming president of South Africa. And for somebody a little younger, but yet as influential to the Rastafarian movement, Bob Marley. Wow, the list goes on and on and on. Of course, there's Bessie Smith, who was she was called Empress of the Blues. One of my favorite people still living is Olesenika. He's a writer, poet, and a playwright, and he's of Nigerian origin. And of course, there was Sojourner Truth. She was one of the original civil rights campaigners and an abolitionist. And so she was very prominent at a time that when women had absolutely no rights, and yet, you know, she gained her own freedom and campaigned for slavery to be abolished. And of course, Harriet Tubman, who was a runaway slave, and then she conducted the underground, what's known as the Underground Railroad, to help people escape from the U.S., from the South, up north, all the way into Canada. And of course, one of my present day heroes, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Not only is he a clergy, but he was anti-apartheid campaigner. He still campaigns for the rights of all people, supports the rights of the marginalized. His work has not stopped, even at, you know, the rightful age of I believe Bishop Tutu is now 86. So let me see. There's so many. I talked about Oprah Winfrey, Malcolm X, who was also a civil rights activist. And of course, people way from history that not too many people will remember. That, Jomo Kenyatta, he was the first, he was a Kenyan politician and the first president of Kenya. He helped Kenya gain its independence from Britain. Okay. And of course, there was Shaka Zulu. I cannot actually pronounce his whole name. It's Shaka Kasenza Gakona. He was commonly known as Shaka Zulu. He was one of the most influential monarchs of the Zulu kingdom. He lived around 1787 to 1828. He was born somewhere near the present-day province of KwaZulu-Natal province in South Africa. He was one of the greatest warriors of his times, and he became a warrior predominantly to defend his people from other warring tribes and the colonialists. Okay, and then there was Ken Saro-Wiwa. This one just breaks my heart. Ken Saro-Wiwa was executed in 1995 because of Shell Oil. He was a writer, a television producer, and an environmental activist. It was his environmental activism because there was oil spills in Nigeria that was not being cleaned up and was affecting the health of the people who live in the Niger Delta region, and he was protesting with them and was a strong activist against the Shell Oil and the government of Nigeria, and he was arrested and was executed with a few other environmentalists in 1995, and the world stood by and did nothing. Then, of course, there's John Lewis. He's a U.S. politician and also a civil rights leader with Dr. Martin Luther King. He's currently a member of Congress. And recently, I believe the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, was having some fight with him. And also one of my personal heroines, Angela Davis. She was, she's still alive. She's not only a political activist, but she's also an academic scholar. And, she was the leader of the Communist Party of the U.S. back in the 60s. And I guess she had some involvement with the Black Panther Party. But through her, she has expressed her interest and her care about people through her political involvement. And then, of course, there's also another distant relative of mine known as Sylvanus Efanio Olympio. He was a politician. He was the first prime minister and then the president of Togo. However, he was assassinated in 1963. He fought for and helped Togo gain its independence from the French. So there were so many. And then, of course, there are people like, in Canada alone, there are people like Marianne Shard that nobody knows about, or hardly anybody knows. She was the first Black Canadian and the first woman in North America to be a publisher, establishing. She created a publication called Provincial Freeman, and an abolitionist newspaper. And let me see what else. Oh, there's lots of people here. There are Elijah McCoy. He was not only a Canadian, but he was also, when you hear the word, the real McCoy, that's who they're talking about. If somebody say that's fake and you say, no, that's the real McCoy, he created lubricant for machinery, for that all lubrication formulas for machinery, automotives are based on today. You know, despite the color barriers of the time, he studied engineering. He left Canada, went to Scotland and studied engineering. Yet when he came back to Canada, he couldn't find a job as an engineer. Instead, he was working as a mechanic on the railroads. That's how he created the McCoy lubricator. And let me see. Of course, there was also Howard Thurman. He was not only an author, philosopher, a theologian, educator, and also a civil rights leader. There was Reverend Addie Eilstock. She was the first black woman ordained minister in Canada. So there's so many people. There's Viola Desmond that the government of Canada is honoring this year. Her picture will be on the Canada's $10 bill. So there's so much more, and I have a link that I'm going to attach below that talk about that will give you a link to if you want to know more. Especially, I would like to mention that Canada, in Canada, the government of Canada this year on the government's website has a link to Noteworthy Black Canadians 2017, and of course there's a YouTube link to CBC The National Viewpoint, and somebody else talk about why it's time for Black History Month to go. And I've got a link down below to that too, and also Black Power, History's Greatest Black Achievers. That's the independent newspaper in the UK. I've also got a link to that. And so that is just a few of the people. So now that I've rambled on, name a few names, so now you can see why I think. So the most important thing that I am trying to impress with this is Black people have been achieving for centuries. Now, there are names that are not on my list. We can go back to the pharaohs of Egypt and building the pyramids. We can go even into the Bible when you talk about King Solomon. So King Solomon, it will tell you when you hear descriptions of his skin, you know he was a black man. But yet when you look at the biblical kings, he was one of the wisest kings in the Bible, in the various Bible stories. The Simeon of Cyrene, who helped Jesus carry the cross, was also a black man. So if you cannot negate, we cannot go on as a global society negating the importance and the contributions, the valuable contributions that Black people and people of color have been making to society since time immemorial. And just to throw this at you, think about it. If Black people do not exist, more than 75% of the world's population will not exist. Just think about that, because Africa is the cradle of civilization. So I want you to think about that. Truly think about that. And this is an education that we all need. Our children need this. If we don't know our history, how can we know our future? We all need to know our history, and we shouldn't just, designate 1 month or 28 days, not even a full month, 28 or 29 days to, one of the most important groups in history. Yes, every group is important, but Black people were here since the beginning of dawn. So we need to acknowledge that and stop discriminating and stop pretending that Black people don't exist or don't contribute. And to my community, my Black community, my people of color, educate yourselves. Be proud of your heritage. Know that you come from people of power, people of great influence. I've been talking for a long time. This is a very long video. So I am going to say that, remember that Black people have been here since the beginning of dawn. We will still be here regardless of whatever is happening. And I would like to conclude this by starting the way I did. The first person I spoke off when I started this video. My video was Major Seth Kobla Anthony. The reason why I can speak about him is I share a DNA with him. He's my family, or he was my family. He was my uncle, my father's brother. His father was my grandfather. This man and many like him gave their lives to fight for the British and the Allies, yet no one recognizes their efforts, or they're barely a footnote in history. So these are the things we need to stop, or we need to stop and start acknowledging people who contribute, regardless of what they look like or what their skin color looks like. People who have contributed to the well-being of the world, who have contributed since time immemorial. We need to truly focus on recognizing that. This is why we need to do away with Black History Month and teach the achievement of Black people throughout time, each and every year, constantly, all day long, in the curriculums. I'm talking about history, in world history, in history of war, in social studies. It's so important when we are talking about teaching history. We need to include everyone, because everyone has contributed. And hopefully people will start thinking about this. Without Black people or people of color, whatever terminology you want to use, people of African descent, more than 80% of the world's population will not exist, because Africa is the cradle of civilization, whether you like it or not. So let's start thinking and appreciating and being honest and having conversations about the contribution that Black people have made to our culture. I'm not talking about just people singing and dancing. I'm talking about people who have been contributing in significant ways for centuries, since time immemorial. Let's talk about the pyramids of Egypt. Let's talk about the first university in Timbuktu. Let's teach our children things like that. Let's talk about people like Masa Musa, Shaka Zulu. Let's remember that these people paved the way or make effort to what we have now. Let's talk about the current day, the the black women in technology that are doing amazing things that nobody know about, the women that code, you know, so there's so much that black people have done, yet it's not recognized. So I'm taking this time to say thank you to my forebearers. Thank you to my foremothers, my forefathers. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I acknowledge you. I may be only one person, but I acknowledge you. Anyway, that is my rant for today. I know this video is going to be awfully long. I really love to have a discussion going about this. So any comment you have, if there's anybody I left off, if I got any names wrong, please send your comments down below. Let's start a discussion going. And please share this video. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please press that subscribe button. But more importantly, on this issue of Black History Month, let's have the discussion. Let's get the discussion started. Do you think it's important to have Black history? How, if we don't have Black History Month, where, you know, how can we get the contribution and all these important contributions of Black people? How do we get it out there for people to disseminate and learn about for themselves? So once again, this is Auntie Essie saying thank you so much for watching. Goodbye for now, and stay blessed.